Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. Have you ever moved somewhere new and felt like you were on the outside looking in? Like everyone else already had their friend group figured out and you were just there? Maybe you've been living somewhere for years, but still feel like you're missing that sense of real community. Like you know people, but you don't really have your people. If any of that resonates with you, this episode is the one you need. Because today's guest didn't just figure out how to build community from scratch. She leaned in and really honed her connection skill set. Charlotte Massey is the executive director for the Seattle Chamber of Connection, a new civic organization that's tackling the nationwide loneliness epidemic. She's also the founder of the Seattle Picnic Society and a content creator focused on intentional gatherings. Here's what you'll find when you listen to Charlotte's story today. She moved to Seattle in October 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, when making friends felt nearly impossible. And instead of just accepting that isolation, she got strategic about it. Like, really strategic. So strategic that I think for a while she didn't want to admit it. Like we're talking friend dating spreadsheets and sales funnel approaches to building connections. But she had her mind set on making new friends. And as you'll hear in the episode, I really admire her for that. If you are in that messy middle of not quite feeling connected to where you are, this episode is going to give you so much inspiration. This conversation is packed with tangible examples you can implement into your own life to create opportunities for connection. You'll hear Charlotte's story of wins and fails as she built herself a new community and how you, too, can feel genuinely connected after maybe a year or two of intentional action. So whether you're brand new to your city or you've been there for years, but still feel like something's missing, get ready to take some notes on this episode. Let's dive in. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
You know, it was so fun to meet you. I always think it's funny because some people I have on the podcast I have known for like a really long time. And then other people I just meet, which is what happened to you. We met for the first time. And by the end of our hangout, I was like, hey, you want to come on the podcast? I'm just coming in real hot. You know, there was no tiptoeing around this. So I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate directness. It helps us move faster.
That's right. I guess I could have tiptoed around it for like 6 months, but I'm really excited that you're here. And gosh, what is it? It's 2025. When we met, we were talking about how you moved to Seattle in 2021. So you have been here for 4 years now. That's long enough to get a little bit of a community under your belt. Do you want to talk a little bit about moving to Seattle and your experience?
Definitely. So I moved to Seattle in October of 2021, which, if you remember, was pandemic times.
Yep.
So it was a particularly difficult time to meet friends because everyone was hiding in their homes, especially in Seattle, and also especially during the winter. And I moved here because my boyfriend was living here, and we're married now, so that worked out. But I was moving from Leavenworth, which is a small Bavarian-themed tourist town that's about 2.5 hours from Seattle, and it's where I grew up. And I had been living at home with my parents during the pandemic because I was working a remote job, and they kept telling me I was going to have to move to DC and then postponing that date so I couldn't get my own apartment. And finally decided that I was going to make the move to the city. And was really excited. I had never lived in a city before. I grew up in this small town, and then I went to college in a small town, and I really wanted the experience of being somewhere where I didn't need to be the person making everything happen. I could just join existing groups and activities. Unfortunately, I moved to the city during a time where there were not as many activities as normal, and it was definitely a challenge to connect and even just to find people who I could try to develop relationships with.
Man, I'm sitting here just knowing your story. I'm like, if your hope was to be able to just join groups and then knowing how this has worked out for you, I'm so sorry, because that's not at all what your experience was. And that sounds so nice. And, in another time, maybe you could have. But you're right. 2021, I don't know about you. To me, it feels like an alternate universe. Like, do you ever have these moments where you think like, wow, I really was just at home for months at a time, and I saw anyways, it's wild. It feels like a completely different time. And Seattle was very shut down. I just feel like that's something people need to understand. Everywhere had its varying levels. Seattle was, parts of Seattle were like boarded up kind of thing. So people were definitely not eager to go to new friends' houses in Seattle. I was going to ask, do you feel like you experienced the Seattle freeze? But I don't even know if that's a fair question with the timing of when you moved here. Did you try to make friends online?
Yeah, so I do think I experienced what people call the Seattle freeze, or even just the Seattle yes-no, where people will say, we should totally hang out sometime. We should totally get coffee. I would love to. And then you try to lock in a time and they flake. Or where you agree on a time and then they get a better offer. Mm-hmm. So I had multiple people who I was trying to connect with who would cancel at the last minute because they had something else come up that they would rather do, and then, we'll totally reschedule and do it another time, and then we didn't. And that was really hard when I was trying to make those first connections, because I was really excited about those coffees, and, it makes sense that they weren't as important to them because they already had social lives and they had other things going on, but I didn't. So that was definitely a challenge. And for me, I spent certainly a lot of time trying to parse apart what was because of the pandemic, what was because I was moving to a big city and I hadn't had that experience before, and what was unique to the city of Seattle that I wouldn't be experiencing elsewhere. And I certainly had times where I very seriously considered leaving Seattle and moving to a different city where it might be easier to connect. And I did eventually find my people, and I do think now that there's something special about Seattle in that once you find your friends and once you connect into your communities, people really do care about you and people are very serious about their networks. But it's harder to break in. So there's fewer opportunities to make large groups of superficial friends immediately, but I was able to find people who will be lifelong friends, and that may have been more difficult in other cities. But I'll have to move to another city in order to A/B test it appropriately.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like that's one of the kindest opinions of Seattle I've ever heard, making friends here. I had a friend who moved here from Boston many years ago now, and her description is what sticks with me, that Seattle's the place where, your coworker or that random person you meet will tell you about the hike they're going on this weekend with friends. And they'll give you all the details. They'll tell you where you're going. They'll tell you what they're excited about. They'll do all these things, but they'll never invite you. I grew up here. So I'm like, oh, yep, I can see that. I can see that for sure.
I do think there's a challenge in Seattle where a lot of the activities that are very popular have limited numbers of people who can participate, a hike really isn't the more the merrier type of activity. And you do really need to know far ahead of time who all is coming and that they have the right equipment and you're depending on them for your safety in some ways. And the same thing with rock climbing or even going out to restaurants. Most of the restaurants are small. You need reservations. A lot of the bars are also small and you can't just show up with a huge group of people very easily. And then also because of the rain for half of the year, we can only meet inside and houses are expensive here. Most people have really small spaces. And so there aren't very many opportunities where you can just invite everyone and they can show up and bring more friends. And I think that structurally that just makes us a more introverted city. And then Seattle is one of the best read cities in the country. And we also go out the least. So everybody loves to read and we don't love to go out and drink and party on the weekends. And there are movements making reading into a semi-social activity, but for the most part, we just do introverted things that can't involve that many people.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, especially in, the winter, like at least half the year, if not 3/4 of the year. And then, the joke in Seattle is kind of like once the weather gets nice, that's when you see everyone again. Like everyone reemerges from their hibernation. And that's where you get invites of like, hey, I'm just going to Green Lake to hang out. Like stop by if you want. But that's such a small part of the year. And then when the fall comes again, people kind of disappear. So if you didn't develop a close enough friendship in that short period of time where everybody's like competing for attention almost, then good luck. Kind of. I think that's kind of the vibe. Yeah.
If you have the option and you're moving to Seattle, move here in April. Don't do what I did and move in October.
Yeah. And if you move, use the spring, summer, like say yes to everything. Like do all the things because that's probably going to make or break your next winter. Man, we sound so harsh. That's not to say like there are networking groups. We're going to talk about some of the groups you've founded. There are options, people. But I do think if you just kind of make it secondary, you could really miss the cycle for some people and it would just make it a lot harder. And whether that's Seattle or elsewhere, like maybe that's something for people to be mindful of if they're moving to a different city, get in those Facebook groups and like ask if there's any trends like that, places I could see where it's snowy, maybe like the New England or like Eastern Canada, places like that. Like I could see there being some patterns, but not that I know what those are. Okay. So you have moved here. Making new friends feels like a struggle. You're wondering how much of it is Seattle and how much of it is you. What were some of your like initial approaches to making friends when you got here?
My first approach was my boyfriend's friends. So I had a group of people who I could hang out with, but it was small and also mostly guys who were all in a frat together. So not exactly my scene, and I wanted more girls to hang out with. So I definitely started with people who I already had some connection with, either through him or people who I knew through high school or college. I made a list of everybody who I had some connection to and started reaching out to them and trying to connect directly. I definitely was able to go on some friend dates or reconnection dates to meet people with mixed results. Some of them we totally got along and I'm still friends with them, and some we just weren't a fit or we were living too far apart for us to be able to have the frequency of connection that I was looking for since I was building my social network from scratch. I also started by trying to join groups. So I joined a bunch of different yoga studios, which for me was a total fail. I was not able to connect with anyone. Everyone just showed up.
Yep.
Was silently in their bubble doing their yoga and then left. And I was super weird trying to say hi to people in the locker room. Did not make friends that way. And I also joined a group called the Mountaineers, which is a outdoor hiking group. and I was volunteering with them. And the Mountaineers are mostly retirees. So I met a lot of really nice people, but they weren't really who I was looking for my deeper connection friends. And the few people my age who I did meet happened to be moving out of the city and moving into new life phases. And so it was not a good lead for me to develop the relationships that I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like had you had other, like I call them present friends, like more present friends, people kind of filled multiple of those other buckets, maybe the Mountaineers would have been a great like supplement for all of your outdoor friendships if you didn't have anybody. And you didn't know. You went and tried it, but turns out it wasn't the right fit.
Yeah, and also the Mountaineers are great if you're looking to get into hiking, but I'm a very experienced hiker. Like, I was helping to teach the Intro to Backpacking course before I had even gone on any of their hikes. And you have to pass a lot of tests in order to go on the more advanced trips. And my schedule was really busy, and so I couldn't fit in the tests. And so I was blocked from participating in the activities that I wanted to do because of the structure.
Yeah.
And so that was also limiting for me for that opportunity.
So the friends that you made a list of like old college friends, high school friends, people that you like, friends of friends, people who lived in the area. Did anything come of that? And I'm asking that because that's obviously a lot of work, right? It's like intentional friend dates. It's like you don't just show up to the Mountaineers on Wednesday and what happens, happens. You're having to like plan ahead, go back and forth, like really put that energy and effort in. I mean, similar to people who maybe burn out on like dating, your friend dating, right? I think it's a really common notion that people burn out on going on romantic dates because it's a lot of work. What was your experience kind of with that friend date piece?
I absolutely treated it like romantic dating.
Yeah.
I was very goal-oriented. I was looking for close friends, and I was looking for people who I could hang out with regularly. And that meant that a lot of people who I really liked or who I connected with were not going to fill the need that I was looking to fill. And certainly there are a lot of people now who are in my broader friend network who I invite to bigger parties, but who I don't see routinely every week or more often than that. My approach was to make a really long list. I knew that I was not going to find my best friend through only a few friend dates, because that's not how it works with romantic dating. You don't expect that you're going to go on one date and you're going to meet the person that you marry. I mean, maybe that works for some people, but it's not the norm. And so I had to accept that there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with this process or this technique of going on friend dates, but I just have to understand that I'm not going to have a 100% conversion rate from meeting up for coffee with someone and them turning into a really close friend. And that was hard because I had not moved as an adult to a new city before, and it was much easier in college because you're just around people all the time and you're in lots of different activities and everybody is looking for connection, and so it was pretty easy to meet people. And then besides that, I had been either traveling or living in my hometown where I already knew people. So this was some acceptance that had to happen for me. And then once I accepted, this is my challenge, I need to build basically a sales funnel in order to convert my friend leads into different tiers of friends.
People can't see me, but I am smiling so big.
And so I had to fill my funnel. And so I set out trying to find potential friend leads. And I expanded my target search. So instead of just connecting with people who I had a connection to from school or from the town where I grew up, I started just DMing people on Instagram and on TikTok who seemed like they would be good fits for friends with me, people who I'd met at conferences, and just always was on the search. So I've met some of my closest friends at ski areas. I met one of my best friends on a chairlift. I met one of my close friends on a hike where we didn't go on the hike together. I met her at the destination, at the lake, and she was with a whole group of young people who lived in Seattle, and they were not very experienced hikers, and I helped them get down because I had extra headlamps and knew the trail really well. And we exchanged numbers, and I followed up and arranged for us to hang out, and now I'm going to her birthday party on Friday. So I think partly it was seeking out connections pretty aggressively, and partly it was just really being bold to exchange numbers and follow up when I did meet someone who could be a connection. And I got pretty comfortable double or triple or quadruple texting without getting responses and just continuing to reach out. And I got a lot of responses saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I really do want to hang out. And because I kept sending invites, eventually we did. And I think if I hadn't been as forward, it would have just become a fizzle and we never would have connected.
Like, I want to hold up a banner that says, like, yay, Charlotte. Like, I don't know, like, applause. The thing is, I'm listening to all this. I already compared it to romantic dating. But if somebody comes to you and they say, I'm ready to find a partner, settle down, move in together, get married, have kids, whatever somebody says, if they told me things like, I sit down every day and swipe on the apps for 30 minutes. I have a spreadsheet of every person I've ever been on a date with. I hired a matchmaker and put money into this. I reached out and spent all this time following up and planning dates and putting, energy behind this. Nobody would blink twice. Nobody would think a single thing of it. They want a connection in their life. They're getting intentional about it. They have a goal. They're going to do, whether that's time, money, energy, whatever. So I just love that you went about it that way and then you treated it like a sales funnel. Like, would it be nice if it naturally flowed better? Yes. And I'm sure that now that you have a little bit more of a network, it naturally flows better. But you had to jumpstart it somehow. So I wish I could throw you a party to celebrate the grit to, I don't know, push through whatever messages were in your head or, oh, I shouldn't need a spreadsheet. I shouldn't whatever. I don't know. Sometimes when you're starting over, we got to do whatever we got to do to make it happen. And it sounds like, you met people on the chairlift and at the hike, and some of it was maybe some chance meeting, but you followed up and you sent multiple texts. Oh my gosh. Also, kudos to you, because so many people would not send multiple texts if there were no response.
Yeah, I really had to get over being embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I will say, I did not tell my friends or my friend leads that I had this spreadsheet going. It's taken me a little bit of time, now that I'm very confident in my relationships, to come clean about how nerdy and scientific I was being about friendship, because you're right, we think that it should happen organically, but we don't have the social infrastructure to make that happen as adults. And so you really do have to force it if you want it to happen quickly, and kind of socially engineer your friendships and your friend groups and what activities you do together. And I knew that I wanted those relationships and that it was going to have to fall on me to make them happen. And part of what made me more comfortable with all of my double and triple texting is that I was inviting them to events that I thought were cool and that I felt did not make me look desperate. So it wasn't like a quadruple text of, hey, will you please get coffee with me? I have no one else to hang out with. It was, hey, I'm hosting this cool thing. Do you want to come? Hey, I'm going to this cool event with some friends. Do you want to join us? And so I think, at least for myself, I felt like I was demonstrating that I was a good friend option because I knew of all these cool things that were going on, rather than making myself look desperate. And that made me more comfortable doing some socially awkward texting.
Yeah. And so many people want to be invited. So what you were doing was very smart, to be honest. Whether it's like an event you created or, hey, there's this community event happening. You know, the Seattle Art Museum does all these cool outdoor things at the sculpture garden, right? If I'm just picking something off the top of my head of like, hey, I'm going to this thing on Thursday. Would you want to go? Whether it's that person or like a few people.
Did you notice anything about the invites that Charlotte is making? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. If you didn't, I'm about to tell you what I hope you noticed, which is that those invites, they are active and specific. She's not saying, hey, I really enjoyed meeting you, or we should get together sometime. The messages she's sending are, I'm hosting this cool thing. Do you want to come? Or I'm going to this event with some friends. Want to join us? Like, look, I get it. There's this urge to go back and forth when you meet someone new, trying to figure out what the other person likes, what would be mutually fun for both of you. But I want to suggest maybe you fight that urge. Because what you'll see in these active invites is that you've done a bit of research. You're presenting an actual idea. It's a message like, hey, there's a new exhibit at the art museum this Saturday afternoon. Want to check it out? Or I'm making tacos Sunday night. Come over around 6. What it's not is a message that says, what do you like to do for fun? Followed by 3 weeks of back and forth trying to coordinate schedules and get everyone's preferences perfect. So just make a decision and send the invite. Yes, some people will say no. But you know what? Some people will say yes because you've made it so easy for them to just simply join in on the fun.
I recommend this with dating too, but if you're going to an event anyways and you would want to go by yourself, you might as well invite a group of people to go with you. And if no one says yes, that's fine. You wanted to do the thing anyways.
Yep.
And if they all say yes, that's also great. And then you have this whole group that you're going with. But if you know that you want to do it anyways, then there's no downside in going by yourself or in trying to bring people with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Whether that's new friends, romantic interests, or honestly, like established friends. You know, sometimes if you're having a hard time, like aligning schedules, if you're going to go, I don't know, to a brewery anyways on Saturday in the afternoon, or you and like one friend are going, it's a great spot to just send out a message. Be like, hey, I'm going to Ballard, which is an area in Seattle with a lot of breweries, on Saturday after 2 p.m. Like, come meet up. You're going anyways. You're right.
You just have to get over the fear that no one says yes. Because if you're inviting people to do things often, you're increasing the chance that sometimes they won't be available or they won't want to do the thing you're inviting them to. And that's fine. That's not a problem. And once you get over that fear, then it's much easier to invite people to do casual things or even to invite them to more formal parties, because it's not a personal feeling or a problem or a sign that you don't have a strong relationship if they're not always available.
Do you feel like the number of no's or rejections you got from people changed over time?
That's an interesting question. I do think there are some people who said no so often that I stopped sending invites because I just assumed that they probably weren't going to be interested. If I got to 4 no's and they didn't invite me back to something, even if they're somebody who I could have a really great relationship with, clearly they're not at a phase right now where they're looking to be spending time with me or with new people. And so that's fine. And often I would invite people to multiple events. They would not respond or say no. And then they would extend an invitation to me back to do something. And that's just as valuable as them coming to my events, maybe more so. And so I think by routinely inviting them to things, I made it to the top of their invite list for their own events.
Yeah.
But now I have a solid group of close friends where I feel comfortable inviting them to much more casual events, or they can just stop by, or we can go grocery shopping together, or go to the plant store together, or meal prep together, and I don't feel like I have to clean my house or be on my best behavior where I'm giving a really positive view of myself because they know me well enough now. And so I think that dynamic has changed rather than the total number of no's. And also now that I know that I have friends who will show up if I tell them that it's important to me, no's don't bother me because I have both the closeness of friends and the depth of friends to pull from, that if I'm trying to fill an 8-person dinner party, that will not be an issue. I just need to decide who I want to be there.
It just makes me so happy because 4 years ago you moved here and, didn't know you were going to meet, 4 years, people. Anybody listening, you could feel like you have this kind of depth in 4 years if you put the energy into it. I just think that's so cool. So something else you did that was super unique, you were talking about how you would invite people to things, but you actually also kind of created experiences for people. Can you tell me a bit about the picnic group and your initial vision for that?
Yes. So I started by hosting dinner parties, and the problems that I was facing were, first, my apartment was very small, so I could only have max 6 people total over for dinner, and often people would bail at the last minute. So I would invite 6 people, maybe one couple can't come, suddenly the whole dynamic is off, and I had too much food, and it was just frustrating and stressful, and also I had to clean my house in order to have people over, and it was just quite a bit of work, especially for an early friend interaction. And so I was walking around Green Lake, and I saw this group of girls who were all having a picnic together. And then the same week, my husband and I were at Golden Gardens, and we saw this big group of 30 friends all having a big picnic together on the beach. And we thought, why don't our friends invite us to do that? Why haven't we done that? And we realized, okay, if we want this to happen, we're probably going to have to plan it. So we invited a bunch of people to a picnic, and nobody said yes. So we postponed, and we did it again. And we had 5 people come to our picnic. And it was really fun. And there was interest in continuing to picnic. So we did it again. And we had, I think, 10 people come. And then we had the next one, and 35 people came. Several people brought their extended friend groups. And so we had this big picnic where people were meeting each other. And I decided, okay, we're going to make this a thing. We need a logo. I called it the Seattle Picnic Society, designed a little flyer in Canva, and started sending that out with invitations. And at this point, I was texting or messaging the flyer directly to everyone individually and tracking in my spreadsheet who I had invited, making sure I didn't miss anybody. And I think that the direct invites were really important because people felt that I directly wanted them there, not just posting it online or sending a link to register. And it was also a perfect activity because it works if no one shows up. My husband and I always brought books. So worst case scenario, we were just having a lovely picnic in the park, and that's great. And it worked if 2 people showed up. It worked if 10 people showed up. It worked if 100 people showed up because we could just keep expanding outward, and it didn't cost us any money. Everyone brought their own food. Everyone brought their own blanket. It was fun. It was a little bit unique, but it was also very casual. And I think that's one of the types of social activities that we're missing, especially in Seattle because of our small spaces and because of the weather. There aren't that many events that are just truly open invite and free, where you can bring anyone that you want, and it really is more the merrier. And so I think people were excited about that environment.
I mean, how cool that it just started. And you are absolutely right on the It's low risk for you to start out, right? It's not in your home. It's a free event. Nobody shows up. You read your book in hopefully the sunshine and hang out at the park. And like you said, nobody came the first time, but you still sent it out again. I think you pointed out so many things that I think will help other people who might be interested in something like this. And whether it's an open invite, like this would be really cool to do in your neighborhood if you want to meet your neighbors. And it could be a picnic, or it could be, you just bring coffee and people bring baked goods and everybody hangs out, I don't know, in the neighborhood park or the gazebo in the middle of your subdivision or whatever it is. There's so many iterations of this that people could do, whether it's the picnics or something else. In the beginning, if you were sending personal invites, it was a lot of your friends in the beginning. Like, what year did you start the picnic society?
I started hosting the picnics in 2023. Okay. So that whole summer, it was all my friends or people who I wanted to be my friends. Mm-hmm. So I would go on first friend dates and make sure that I liked them or that we had a connection. And then I would just invite everyone who I met to picnics. So instead of we should totally get coffee sometime, which probably turns into never getting coffee, I would say, I have a picnic group. Our next meeting is next Thursday. You should come. And if they came, great. And if they didn't come, also fine. It's not like I had planned my weekend around connecting with them and then they were no longer available. And it gave also an opportunity for people who wanted to come often to come every single time, rather than if I was hosting dinner parties, mixing it up or having a really limited number of seats in my apartment because, we had 6 chairs. And the other piece that I really liked about the picnics is that I could tell people to bring their friends. And meeting friends of friends is a really great way to expand your network. Mm-hmm. And people felt comfortable coming to an event where they were bringing their friends who they knew they would want to hang out with. They had met me, but they hadn't met the other people who I knew. So it made people feel more comfortable that they could bring their friend groups. And it was a really great way to expand everyone's friend network and be able to meet new people where we already had warm introductions.
I want to talk a little bit more about what Charlotte's doing here and how you can apply this to your life. So you just heard Charlotte talk about these picnics and mention that when she would meet someone, instead of saying, let's get together for coffee, she could just say, I host these picnics every month on the 3rd Saturday. I'm just making that up, but she's just throwing it out there and saying, you want to come? Now, one, this is allowing people to, again, just make it easy to say yes and join in on the fun. They don't have to do planning. There's no back and forth. It's consistent and reliable. So if they can't make it this month, maybe they can make it next month. There's so many reasons that this works well. One final one that I'll mention before I give you some other ideas for this is that all those people you're meeting and suggesting they come to the picnic, they can meet each other. And I know that somebody might want to connect with you, but if they find you interesting, they probably find other people who find you interesting. You see what I'm saying? So how can this be replicated and applied to your life? I want you to think about maybe if you're in a position career-wise where you always have people who want to pick your brain or get together. Instead of constantly setting up these one-off events, maybe even you feel burnt out by those one-off events, you could pick a networking event that you go to regularly. And you could just start saying, hey, I go to this networking group on the 3rd Thursday. I'd love to see you there. Or you could create your own gathering. You could say every 4th Thursday at 5 p.m., you'll be at this one specific bar. And look at that. You're doing exactly what Charlotte is doing here. you are creating a space for these warm leads in your life to not only connect with you, but potentially also connect with each other. So what are some other examples of this? Let's say that you are a new parent and you want to connect with other parent friends. Okay, maybe not a new parent because this wouldn't really work for newborns, but in that like toddler elementary school phase, you could pick a park and you could tell people that you go there every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Same concept. Or if you just moved to a city, you could pick a coffee shop Sunday morning at 9 a.m. You could bring a book or maybe a art project you're working on, or just your laptop to get some life admin done. And then if people show up, it's lovely to see them. And if not, you get to check off some stuff on your to-do list or get through a couple chapters of your book. The beauty here is the consistency and the open invite. People know where to find you, they know when, and they know that they can just show up without it being some big production. Which is all to say that this model could work for you. Maybe it's a monthly potluck or a weekly walk around your neighborhood or showing up to the farmer's market every other Sunday. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, Alex, I don't know how this would work for me in my exact scenario, then send me a message. Send me a message and let's brainstorm.
Yeah, you just intuitively did so many things. Because I was also thinking to myself, like, the picnic's also great because people can be really mobile. They don't feel like they're like stuck in their seat. They can move around and like interact with different people. So on it, Charlotte. You knew deep down that this was what you needed to make more connections, but also Seattle as a whole. And did you have something else to say about that?
Yes, I have a couple of tips. So if you also would like to start a picnic group, I recommend not planning the picnics too far ahead of time because you don't want to plan a picnic on a day when it's raining. I have done that. We picnicked in the rain. It was fine, but it's nicer when it's sunny out. So I usually plan a picnic 5 days ahead of time so that I make sure that there's a pretty good chance the weather's going to be good. Also, I pre-designate the park, but I don't tell people the specific spot because you never know if there's going to be an event happening or what the exact situation is going to be. So I'll show up early and I will send out a photo and a pin of the exact location so that everyone can find me. And I make sure that I arrive early because I had a couple of picnics where I arrived at the start time and other people had gotten there first and were texting me and trying to coordinate, and they didn't know each other, so they couldn't find each other to know who they should be sitting with, and it just was logistically chaotic. So I really recommend getting there first, scoping it out, and then telling people where you are. And then also if you can be near bathrooms or near garbage cans, that's really helpful just to make sure that you can clean up easily after the picnic. But you also can host other types of events that are in the same vein. So you can host a walk, or I started hosting craft nights during the winter because you can't picnic all year round in Seattle, but I still wanted to create that space. And you can do them in your house. I rent an art studio space so I can have much bigger craft nights, and I do those once a month. But just letting everyone bring their own craft and hang out in a living room is a really easy social event to host that's also open invite, and it's easy to do when the weather isn't good.
My mind is just running with ideas over here. Yeah, I love it. So then the craft group, we didn't talk specifically about this when you and I talked. Like, is the craft group the same thing as the Seattle Picnic Society, or is it now like its own group? Like, do you market them differently, or are they all under one umbrella?
My branding umbrellas could use some work. Right now, I have my Instagram account, which is Charlotte Gets Creative, and I advertise all of the events through there and also through my Substack. And then I have a group that's on Halo, which is called the Seattle Picnic Society, but I also post the craft events there. So I've been playing around with ways to make everything be under the same umbrella, but basically I host the craft nights all year, including during the summer, and then I just do the picnics during the summer. And most of the advertising is on social or to my email list.
Got it. I was mainly wondering because I was wondering if like they were the same group or if they were different groups. But it sounds like it's probably a lot of people. Like some people maybe just go to the picnics or just go to the crafts, but there's maybe a good number of people who kind of intermix between the two. And that way, the other reason I'm asking that is like then you've now found a way, it sounds like, to have some like year-round continuity for people who come and want to meet new friends, but like we were talking about earlier, moved here at the end of August. Then it sounds like they got to pick a craft to bring if they want to keep running into some of the same people at the craft nights throughout winter.
Definitely. And so there's a transition for me. I started the picnics and the craft nights individually inviting people who I personally wanted to be friends with. And then they got to a point where I wanted to open it up to more people. And I posted about the picnics on Instagram. And my reel went viral. And suddenly, instead of having max 35 people at my picnics who I had individually texted, I had over 100 people who wanted to come to the picnics. And the group shifted from being all people who I knew, who I had personally invited into the group, to truly open invite, anybody can come. And that was a transition because I had to shift from having the group be focused on my social life and my friends who I already knew to me hosting a public event that was a space where others could connect with each other. Mm-hmm. And it did take a little bit of transition of me figuring out how I wanted the new group to operate. But now it is fully open invite for anybody in the city who is into picnicking and wants to come and have a picnic with other people who are also open to connection and are looking for new friends. And it's the same thing for the craft nights. So you can bring your own craft. I also always have paints and paper and postcards that have coloring pages on them, so you can use those. It's really not about making incredible art. It's about having something to do while you sit at a table and chat with new people. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely some regulars and also some people who come once or twice. And usually by the end, people are exchanging contact information and making plans to do something else together, which is the whole goal. It's a starting place for meeting other people who are also looking to connect. And that was one of the pieces that I felt was missing when I was trying to meet people by doing activities. Because if you sign up for a pottery class, you will meet people, but some of them may be there because they just want to learn pottery, not because they're looking to meet new people. So even just putting in the event, this event is explicitly for people who are looking to connect and looking to make new friends, it means that it's equally about the activity and connecting. And I think that that is really powerful, just getting a bunch of people in a room together who have some kind of shared interest, who are looking for friendship.
Yeah, I love that. Because I think you're right? It's the intention of somebody being open to something beyond just what's happening in that weekly room crafting kind of thing compared to pottery. Because like I want to take a pottery class, but you're right. I would love to make friends in my pottery class. And if I hit it off with someone, that's not to say, but I'm not going into it with the intention of I'm going to make all these new friends that I'm going to take outside a pottery class. Now, that might be my intention if I just moved here, but because I have, like an established network, I'm mainly going for the pottery. And then everybody has their different levels of openness. So I think you're right. Like the intention for anybody who wants to organize something like that, that's a great call out. Or also maybe just a reminder for somebody, if you're going to a pottery class, there might be people in that room who are trying to make a new friend because they just moved to this city. We could all be a little more open sometimes. Okay, so you have obviously been an established community builder in Seattle. You moved here and you just, be the change you want to see in the world. That's what you did. Like you wanted some more spaces to go make some friends and you were like, okay, well, looks like I'm going to have to create some spaces. So it would make sense, your newest transition, your newest role as the executive director for the Chamber of Connection here in Seattle which is how you and I met. Can you just give a brief overview of what the Chamber of Connection is?
Yeah, so we know at a national level that we have a crisis of isolation, and there's incredible work being done at the grassroots level from people who are organizing groups like my picnic group or bringing people together around shared interests or shared identities. But we don't have any national infrastructure for supporting connection. And we also don't have any onboarding resources to help people when they move to a new city. And so what we're doing at the Chamber of Connection is we are creating an onboarding process similar to what you would have when you go to a new school or when you join a big company, but it's for everybody and it's focused on your whole experience in a new city. And so our primary programming is called Welcome Day, and it's a monthly event that in Seattle is at Town Hall, and you can come and do a half-day workshop that will help you build your plan for a connected life. So we have programming built around the 6 points of connection, which are that you should know your neighbors, you should be part of a group that's based on an interest, part of a group that's based around an identity, you should have a third place, you should be involved in community service, and you should also have one-on-one connections who you're able to see ideally once a week. And most of us could use some work on our 6 points of connection, but having all of those pieces is how you can have a fully connected life. Oh, and you also should know your neighbors. I think I might have missed that one.
No, you got it. That was the first one.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Yeah, you got them all.
I was trying to count on my hands.
Makes sense. It's a lot to remember, but I was thinking, yeah, like as you were saying that, like some people with each one are probably like, yeah, a little, yep, still missing that one. It takes a lot of energy and effort to kind of build that well-rounded, and sometimes you may have them all and sometimes you might be missing one or two, but yeah, when you move, you're probably starting over in a sense as far as the local people. Not to say you don't have connections who you can call or message or fly across the country to see or can fly to see you, but it's a little different than the people you see day in and day out. And I mean, in my mind, I'm like, you're out here building the thing you wish had been here again when you moved.
Definitely. I wish that Welcome Day had existed when I was here. The other piece that's really important with the 6 points is that you're not going to be able to do all of them at once. Like, you can make your plan at Welcome Day,
Yep.
but you're going to need to tackle them one at a time, and it will take work. And that's part of what we talk about, that building connection is active, but when you're doing it in community with others who are also new, who are also trying to build connection, it gives you that instant group where you can go do things together, even if you end up not being long-term close friends. And once you come to Welcome Day, we onboard you into a online group, which is also hosted on Halo. And you're able to sign up for low-cost activities together. So a group will get together and go on a bike ride or go to a museum and share a meal after, go to a farmer's market together and have a picnic. So they're activities that both connect you to your neighborhood and get you to expand your understanding of the city and cross neighborhoods and connect with other people who have shared interests who are also new and who are working on their 6 points. And that is really helpful when you're trying to find your long-term communities.
Yeah, you feel a little less alone. You're reminded that like other people are also out here having to actively do this and put themselves in places and sometimes feel maybe a little uncomfortable and push themselves into situations that maybe you wouldn't choose otherwise. Not to say you have to go do, but like it's uncomfortable to go anywhere where you don't know anyone. Even for me, I like to remind people of that. Like I'm a very extroverted person, and even meeting a new group, I have to take a moment and be like, it's okay. Just push through the initial discomfort. As soon as you're talking to someone, it's going to be okay. So yeah, if you make a little cohort and then you get to go together, that helps a little bit. You have like at least a familiar face. I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm curious. If somebody has lived in Seattle for a while, but they feel like they never built their 6 points of connection here. Like they feel very isolated here. Even if they're not a newcomer, can somebody go to a welcome day?
Yeah, so we've had lots of people who are not new but are in other points of transition come to Welcome Day. And certainly the 6 points is going to be really valuable if you feel like you don't currently have your 6 points. If you do feel like you've pretty much developed all 6, Welcome Day isn't going to be that helpful for you because it's mainly focused on connection around building your 6 points.
Yeah, I was just thinking, there's so many examples. Like, for example, let's say somebody moved here and, Seattle's got a lot of big tech companies. For example, you moved here from somewhere else in the world and you maybe didn't think you were going to be here that long. You thought your position was for 1 year. I've talked to people where they're like, well, it's not even really worth it. And so they just work all the time. Or I've talked to other people who, men especially, who have been just like so hyper-focused on their career and getting to a certain level. And then they wake up in like their mid-30s and realize they don't have any friends and they don't really know anybody besides their coworkers. I mean, I could go on and on with examples of this, but yeah, that's why I was asking. I just think there are some people where this has never been a priority. And for one reason or another, at a certain point, they realize like, oh, I've maybe focused on one area of my life and I don't know my neighbors and I've never volunteered and I don't really go do all these activities. I know that's hard for us to imagine because connection's a really big priority, but I also know there are people who just haven't thought of it.
Definitely. And right now, too, there's a lot of people who moved here 4 or 5 years ago, but then most of the time they've been here was during the pandemic. And so you can feel like you've only actually been here for a year because there were so many different activities that weren't available for a couple of years there.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I know some people like that. That makes sense. So to close out this episode, if someone was moving to a new city, or maybe to Seattle specifically, I mean, I think if they're moving to Seattle, you tell them to come to Welcome Day. But if somebody's moving to a new city, what advice would you give someone as far as connections concerned?
Yeah, well, I would say start with your 6 points. And we do have more information about all 6 points on our website, chamberofconnection.org. And we're working on having a workbook that you'll be able to buy even if you're not coming to a Welcome Day. We do provide them at Welcome Day. And just make yourself a plan. So how am I going to meet my neighbors? It's easiest if you do it early, but it's never too late to meet your neighbors. And figure out how you're going to do it. Maybe you're going to throw a block party. Maybe you're going to say hi when people are walking their dogs. Or I meet a lot of my neighbors because I garden in the planting strip between the street and the sidewalk. And so I like say hi to people as they walk by. And just make that plan for yourself around each of the 6 points and check in on it, on how you're doing to progress. And realize that it will probably take a year or two before you have fully built your connected life, but it's not going to happen unless you're actively working on it. So you can track your progress and celebrate the small wins and stay connected to the people who you know from home. So that way you don't end up in this middle ground where you haven't yet connected in your new city, but you've lost touch with your old friends. So that way you are able to be supported through the whole process. And I would also say be really confident in taking action and don't be embarrassed or feel like you're doing something wrong if you get a lot of rejection, because that's part of it. If you think of it like a sales funnel, you're going to need to have many more leads than convert down into being your friends at the end. So that's just part of the process and it's normal. And it's a sign that you're reaching out to enough people to end up with the friends that you want at the end.
Yeah, sign that you're being active. That's the thing I like you're doing the thing. If you weren't trying, you would get no rejections if you weren't putting yourself out there. So it's actually a good sign. I'm with you on that. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for coming on Friendship IRL. I'm going to have so many links of where people can come find you between the Seattle Picnic Society and your Instagram and the Chamber of Connection. I just want to say thank you for all of your work. I know you started doing it to build yourself community, but We need people like you out there doing this work to help everybody else.
Yeah, and I think if we're all doing our piece to build connection, that's how we're going to get to a connected society, and that's how we're going to decrease the social isolation crisis that we're in right now.
Yeah, I agree.
This conversation with Charlotte is going to stick with me for a while. You want to know why? Because she's being honest about what it takes to make friends sometimes, especially when you move somewhere new where you don't have a network to tap into. Like, I'm going to be thinking about her spreadsheets to track her friend dating progress for a while because they're honest and because they worked for her. If they work, who cares? Like, I am applauding all the effort and the energy and the intention that Charlotte put in, because here's what she showed us today. Building community as an adult requires us to be active and intentional. It takes strategy, and sometimes it takes treating friendship like it is a top of the list life priority. So whether you're brand new to your city like Charlotte was, or you've been somewhere for years, but you still feel like you're missing your people, the principles are the same. Get specific about your invites, show up consistently, don't be afraid to follow up multiple times, and maybe, most importantly, if the community you want doesn't exist, create it. Because remember, Charlotte went from knowing basically no one in Seattle to having a thriving friend community, being tapped into local organizations, and hosting events for 100+ people. All because she decided to be the person who makes things happen instead of waiting for someone to invite her. Now, if you're like me and you're a Seattle local, we're so lucky because Charlotte has literally built all sorts of infrastructure to help us connect locally. So be sure to head to the link in my bio to check out links for the Seattle Chamber of Connection and their Welcome Day, or show up to one of the picnics with the Seattle Picnic Society. All these links are in the show notes. And I hope that at the end of today's episode, you just remember that connection is possible. It just takes a little courage, a little persistence, and maybe a good spreadsheet. With that, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander. Or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.